Welcome back to our final session for the Canadian case studies. I'm Ruth at Code for Canada in collaboration with Forward 50, and we're showcasing work that we've been doing for the past year. Once again, just a reminder, don't forget to chime in on Twitter at #Forward50. And if you aren't already following Forward 50, you can do so at Forward50Conf. That's at Forward50CONF, short for conference. Every year, there's about 10,000 members of the Canadian Armed Forces who transition out of military service and into civilian life. And the mandate for them, for the Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group, is to provide critical support to these members, including health benefits, finding meaningful employment, and financial services. Right now, the transition process for these individuals is manual and fragmented. So it was really critical to them to make this process as user-centered as possible. And that's when they decided to partner with us at Code for Canada. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Hishan, Corin, and Robert to walk you through this critical project. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Forward 50 presentation for Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group. We'll be talking about digitizing military-civilian transition with members at the center. A bit of an agenda. So first we'll go through the CAFTG team and the problem space, the needs of CAFTG, some of the discovery and the challenges we found, and stick around for this, the prototype demo, and some of the advancements, what government work is like, and then just what's next for CAFTG. So quickly, the team consists of myself, Hishan, I'm the product manager, Corhan is our software engineer, and Robert Smallwood is the CAFTG special advisor. So let's talk about the problem. Let's meet Matthew. Matthew is a regular force member from the Canadian Armed Forces. He's approaching his terms of service, so he wants to find more information about how he can transition into civilian life. Now, one of the problems here that I highlighted was, you can see in the quote that Matthew says, "I don't know what I don't know." This is a key thing that we've discovered time and time again with research and transition process. So Matthew goes out to find help from what he knows best. So he goes online, finds details, but what he mostly finds is a lot of information that's not necessarily tailored to him. So he's frustrated because through his career, everything's been tailored. He's been told where to go, what to do, and this time he feels like he's alone. He finds hope because he wants checklists, he wants things that he can record and know what's next, but he just finds more static information, and he's unable to make good sense of it specific to him. So what happens to Matthew? There's a lack of curated information. He's left to search for information on his own, but one of the biggest things is that Matthew is stressed out because he wants to get the right information for his transition, and he wants to avoid delays in benefits, finances, continuation of healthcare. These are important factors that we need to consider when we're looking at transition for a military member. Now, I'm just going to call over my colleague, Bob Smallwood, and he's going to speak about some of the needs for CAFTG.
Thanks, Hishan. So I work in an organization called the Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group. Within the Canadian Forces, we have a military personnel generation group to bring people into the forces. We have a multitude of organizations to manage people and look after them while they're serving in the Canadian Armed Forces. But we didn't have a group that was specifically tasked to help members to transition to post-military life. So at the same time, the government wrote a defense policy, Strong, Secure, Engaged, in 2017, and they mandated that this group, the transition group, would be stood up. Well, that was part of the challenge that we had. At the same time, we were suffering by a 1950s paper-based linear process that was designed to terminate people's service. It was what we wanted was modern digitally enabled tools and applications through which we could provide guided support to members and track their progress through to a successful transition to civilian life. So concurrent with standing up the organization, we developed a digital workflow environment to modernize administration. We also developed a 5-step military to civilian transition process. But we were still struggling with how to meet the expectations of our members. We needed help to understand what the members' journey was really like, what their pain points were along the way, and potential solutions to improve that members' transition experience. So we decided to reach out to Code for Canada to get help from a fellowship team. When we started to tackle this challenge, we identified that we had a great deal of information available to members. Unfortunately, it was in a lot of different places. Some of it was old or out of date, and nothing was easy to find. We also wanted members to be able to access the transition-related tools and services from the internet, through their phone, tablet, or home computer, and not be solely dependent on access through our government intranet. We also wanted finding our information and services to be intuitive and easy. And specifically, as Hishan has mentioned, we wanted digital capability designed for members like Matthew. We want them to be tested and trialed by Matthews, and we wanted them to be appreciated and liked by Matthews. Our digital strategy also included the requirement for an interface between our member-centric portal on the intranet and the digital workspace for our staff on the intranet. And this was no small ask because we're talking about the Department of National Defense, and they're fairly security conscious about any connections to the internet from our internal systems. However, we knew that we needed to be interoperable between our systems. We needed to enhance the way we shared information and data, and we needed to be able to collect data analytics. One area that we didn't have a problem was we had access to a lot of mission partners within the department who could develop digital capabilities for us. But we needed help with IT project management and how to conduct quality assurance and testing to ensure that the products or outcomes that we were receiving were fit for purpose. People like me, I'm a retired Army colonel. I did not speak the IT language, and we had very few people who did. So we needed help in the preparation of technical documentation that would be appreciated by those mission partners who were going to develop the capabilities. And of course, being military people, we were impatient, and we wanted to see results as quickly as possible. We have certainly come to appreciate the agile approach to product development. And lastly, we wanted the members' experience to be standardized across the Canadian Armed Forces. We wanted the member to have a similar experience and access to the same tools and services no matter where they were serving, in Canada or overseas. Now I'll pass the presentation over to my colleague, Corin.
Hey all. Okay, so to be able to help Matthew, we first had to do some discovery. And to do so, we first had discovered the tools in use, and we were surprised that there are more than 15 digital tools. And we realized that with so many like user-facing tools, there is clearly no one-stop shop for the members to visit. And also another thing we realized was these systems were not communicating with each other. For example, we found a tool that was just used for filling a form and then print it, and then an administrator would have to enter this data into a separate system again. Wouldn't it be nice if this data was just changed between these applications? And we thought it would be nice. And we also used these for our user interviews because we became aware of which tools were used, and yeah, we got their feedback on these tools. Okay, and we also learned about the existing processes through staff interviews and existing documentation. And we collaborated with users like Matthew to inform our design and priorities. And to do so, we did the user interviews, and based on these, we created the mindsets. traditionally, this at this stage, user personas are used, but we received around 25 personas, which was too much. So we had to bring our focus to a smaller user set. So for that reason, we created these two axis system of playfulness and self-sufficiencies, and based on that, we understood our users as cautious, pragmatic, and prostate and spontaneous. And from that, we created a experience map to decide where to focus, and we found that we should be focusing on these four main parts of the process. And to do so, we faced some challenges. One of them was adaptation of the new processes and technologies. Within our team, we used all these technologies and the processes that you're seeing here, but we would like these to be adapted from the whole organization. And another challenge is to access the internal networks and data. There is a need to know principle, but figuring out what needs to be known can get tricky. And we were relying on guidance of individuals, and finding the right individual was sometimes tricky. And that required communication with multiple stakeholders. And getting access to resources is a lengthy process, and requests might not be approved. And we even our technical need conditions are satisfied for communication of these different systems. Another challenge is heavy on long processes. It's fairly like that for compliance requirements, but this is one of the challenges that we've been facing, and we probably still face. And another challenge was improving communication. So commonly communicating through emails to individuals is the common way. We would like to keep that, but in addition to that, we would like new digital collaboration and communication tools to be adapted. Channels accessible to the whole staff would be nice to be used for common knowledge sharing and collaboration. And we would like to see a living and collaborative documentation where it is possible. And technical debt is another important challenge. This is this really shows the point of what technical debt is. Where we would like to be is as close to the green line as possible. So we would like to have well-maintained, up-to-date systems and new processes and technologies adapted as required. But this is ideal, and we would like to avoid being close to the yellow line, where we stick to the old ways and legacy systems and not continuously maintaining or improving the systems. And another challenge is non-operatable existing systems. So we found that the user-facing systems were fully independent of each other, and they had no useful connections or integrations to increase user experience, and they also did not have consistent look and feel. And I will pass it to my colleague Hisham.
Thank you, Korhan. So I'd like to talk about a few of the advancements that we've made with CAFTG. One of the primary ones being flexibility in the development process and the development software. So we're trying to make sure that we consider all types of users, peripherals, interfaces, and future-proof those applications, and set in some of the processes in place for CAFTG to be able to resource that flexibility. And how do we get that flexibility is through modular design. One of the challenges that we found within D&D is that because everything is so tight with security, there is this tendency to build monolithic applications where business logic and database logic gets tied into the UI. And what we're trying to do is separate this. So we're trying to achieve this separation of concerns. We have some confluence on the development teams to build towards a microservice type of architecture, so CAFTG can pivot in the future. So when there is a different type of interface that comes along, where the standard is, say, like a metaverse or a virtual reality interface, then we don't need to rebuild software in order to achieve that. We could just use the flexible system and the modular design that we made to incorporate a new client. Breaking silos. This is one of the key things that we tried to make sure that we did throughout the project. And the reason is we want to create this collaborative design and delivery team because in Canadian Armed Forces and Department of National Defense, they get software resources from organizations within D&D. So there are teams that handle the development of software, but they're not closely managed by the teams that kind of contract them or resource them. So what we tried to do was trying to set that up, set the groundwork for them to work in kind of a Scrum type of team with the software teams. When we first came in, there's good coordination of external agencies, and they go from requirements creation to waiting for delivery, and there's good testing of processes, but we want to kind of change that to incorporating self-managed teams that can direct CAF-TG involvement, so we can have regular stand-ups and lift blockers quickly for teams, because one of the main problems that we found was delays in time, because if a team comes to a blocker, they're waiting sometimes weeks in order for that blocker to get lifted, because they're just not collaborating closely. And one of the main ways that we do this is to work in a phased approach, so we can deliver value incrementally and work closer together. And so phased approach, the reason that we want to approach it this way is because this allows the CAF-TG team to work closer with the development teams, because they're constantly delivering value and getting feedback and checking, versus waiting for a long list of requirements, a couple of years, delivering software and seeing feedback. What we're doing is they're validating the delivery of the software and the delivery of the value in phases. So, and then the development teams also have more palpable, more manageable requirements in little smaller sets, and we set up milestones along with it. And one of the things that really supports that, that really speaks to that, is using what's currently built by CAF-TG. So currently they have software that's been built for members, and there's software that's built for transition advisors. So what we wanted to do was use the in-flight work and deliver some sort of value in the first phase, and then instead of waiting for the ideal system. And then in the second phase, what we do is we build towards the ideal system, we integrate security, and we start delivering value incrementally. So the ideal system can go through sprints, have features delivered in smaller pieces versus a larger pie. And then in phase 3, we go to adopt some of the new Treasure Board sign-in, deprecate older systems, and then integrate with external agencies like Veterans Affairs and financial services. So let's get back to Matthew. What should have Matthew had? Well, he should have had the Digital Transition Center, where he can accurately curate and track information that's related to his transition. So we're just going to go through a small demo of phase 1 and phase 2. Okay, so here we are at our phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 mock-ups. Let's go into phase 1. As I said, in phase 1, we're trying to leverage what's already been done by CAF-TG and software teams. So you can see here we're in the Canada.ca transition pages, with the exception now there's a digital transition center. And when we go in, we have the ability to apply for transition. This is how we're leveraging what's already been done. CAF-TG's developed a digital workflow already that communicates with their defense network for members to be able to submit transition application digitally, and we've incorporated that here. And then they can also book appointments with transition advisors, find a transition center, translate their military skills and training, and other key transition related information, as well as linking out to Veterans Affairs. Now that is phase 1. So this had already been built by the software team in D&D, and what we simply did was kind of take apart some of the things that didn't need to be done, prioritize things that should be there, and then try to get it into delivery and leverage what's already been built by CAF-TG. And then if we go into phase 2, again, we're back at the Digital Transition Center, military transition pages, and then we have the Digital Transition Center here. We're linking into our DTC just as before, except this time we have an authenticated section where you can actually conduct and track information. So we're using the sign-on that's already been built by D&D, and then we signed into the Digital Transition Center. Now, here I want to show you just two key pieces that are really going to help CAFTG coordinate transition with members. But of course, there's lots of other things. Of course, you can apply for transition still. There is resources that you can access, and then we're trying to set up secure messaging with inside DWAN so we can coordinate with members outside, notes and documentation. But one of the key factors here is they can come here, quickly book a consultation if they haven't already before with either a transition advisor. This is where linking in transition advisors, service coordinators, release administrators. So these are other entities that help with release for members. So we're trying to create this team approach. And then they quickly create an appointment for themselves. They can see their appointment history, what's coming up, and other aspects of their appointments. The other key point that we wanted to make sure that CAFTG had was the digital transition plan. Now, one of the reasons why we prioritize this is because that experience map that Korhan showed you, the low points, those red boxes that we saw, were all in the tracking and managing items for transition and knowing what to do and planning. So we decided that the best way is to use what CAFTG has developed in the form of a transition plan and digitize that in the best way possible. So if you see here, they're told about their transition plan. They can go to their transition advisor and book a consultation. But within their plan, they have everything sorted out. So all their checklist items that they need to do by specific dates and times, it's all sorted out for them. And then we can also sort them by domains of well-being. This is something that CAFTG prioritizes for everything that they build that's member-facing. So you can see here that if we can go in, they can go into each item. They can annotate whether they need help, which will notify a transition advisor if they have one assigned to them within the D&D environment. They can set a priority, and most importantly, they can add some notes here, which will add notes to the same plan that a transition advisor looks at, and then their transition advisor can also add notes back. So what this creates is that two-way engagement for transition, because CAFTG often faces two problems. One is that members won't utilize the transition centers and services by TAs because they want to self-guide and direct. And two is that when members do self-guide and direct themselves, they often miss things that are important to them, which they wouldn't have if they had a transition advisor. But what this does is it allows CAFTG to see any member that is interacting with the transition plan or could be thinking about transition and going through some of these steps, even if they haven't gone into a transition center and engaged with the transition advisor. And then they can reach out to this member through their email or through the transition center directly and ask them if they would like help with their transition. They notice that they're having some problems and kind of engage them that way. So this will give them that two-way communication tool for self-guidance and assisted guidance, and it will give members that one place to go, that one thing to do, that one source of truth. So that's our prototype. I've shared phase 1 and phase 2, and of course phase 3 is going to be at a later date for development. Okay, so that was our demo of our prototypes, phase 1 and phase 2. And I'd like to show you a little bit about what people thought. Testing is at the center of everything that we do. We want to make sure it's tested by members for members. So things like my friend that is going through transition needs this. It's definitely had the government look and feel, had confidence. I was on a trusted site. We like hearing this type of stuff because we're constantly trying to make sure that we stay within the parameters of Canada.ca. We're trying to make sure that there's usability. And things like I would have used this when I was working on my resume. These are literal quotes from testers that were testing the software who were quite pleased with it. The other factor that we really wanted to influence within CAFTG is this concept of agile value delivery. Like I said, agile value delivery is basically being able to deliver a small bit of value at a time instead of waiting for everything to be done, and then staying as flexible as possible in order to deliver that value. And what this allows CAFTG to do is really work closer with the development teams and the resource providers because they're working in milestones and not waiting until everything's done and waiting to give feedback. So we went through sprints and we kind of demonstrated what that was like. We could see here, and testing, like I said, was at the heart of what we did. We could see here that as we go through sprint 1, sprint 2, the prototype changes and it lets them know that we're testing with users, but we're also changing the look and the feel of the interface, so we capture some of those concerns. And testing is one of the most important aspects of what we've tried to achieve here, is letting CAFTG know and put in the processes in place to test with users like Matthew and make sure that the software is fit for purpose. So we have scripted tests. We also did professional tests with services like Try My UI. We did accessibility testing. All of these are in the effort to make sure that it's as usable as possible for as many members as possible. So like I said, we were doing Try My UI testing. Testers were asked to complete a set of tasks. And the feedback that we got is valuable, and we used it to iterate our product through sprints. We also collected other feedback beyond just the prototype, so then we can kind of make sure that we capture some of these things overall for CAFTG. Members are interested in training and they value it, but they feel that training is not as accessible. So we were trying to make sure that we highlight some of these things so that we can incorporate some of these factors into the digital space that we're creating. Now I'm just going to let my friend or my colleague Korhan take over and just to talk about delivery.
Thanks, Ishan. So based on our experience, like the key takeaways that we would like to tell you about regarding delivery of digital services successfully. So the first thing, based on our experience, we found it's a good idea to have alternative plans, and I think it was a kind of like playing chess. So we had to plan accordingly because there are so many stakeholders and compliance requirements. Things might not go according to your plan A, so you should have plan B and plan C, and move forward like that. For instance, for example, we couldn't get like the hosting option for that we planned for plan A, so we went with plan B. Same with the domain names and etc. So you need to shape accordingly, and at the end, ideally, you can reach to the ideal target of having your service released. Another important suggestion that we can give you is focusing in an area, because the scope is so big that and we are limited by time, resources, and we don't want to reduce the quality. For this reason, focus on an area, idea solution on that, solve that problem, and later focus on the other areas. For instance, for our case, medical releases was a very complicated process. And for that reason, we kept it for later for better concentration. And for now, we decided to plan for our digital services delivery for general member population. And other important thing is to follow the Government of Canada's digital guiding principles. We think that these principles we can all agree about, especially regarding designing with users, building accessibility from start. And our styles had to consider these factors as compliance reasons too. So if you satisfy these requirements, you will be satisfying the compliance requirements as well. So it will give you easier time for your product success. And most importantly, testing with users. Like as you can see in the demonstration here, our users guided us to shape our final prototype. So users will guide you regarding what they need for the best outcome. So definitely test with your users and build your product with your users. And I will pass it back to Hishan.
Thank you, Korhan. So I'm just going to talk about a little bit about what's next for Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group. First, we've developed an agile roadmap, and as I said before, we have taken a long list of requirements and broken them down into small milestones that are achievable for the development teams, and then we've collaborated and coordinated a Scrum team atmosphere with the delivery teams, so we can work closely together, get feedback, and go through milestone by milestone instead of waiting for a large list of requirements to be delivered. So let's get back to Matthew. After everything is said and done, it is really all about people like Matthew. If we come back and if we achieve all of the things that we set out for CAFTG, if we get to a point when we're in phase 2 and we have this digital transition center for Matthew to go to and everything's set up and all the stars align, then Matthew has a nice link that he can go into military transition, and in there he finds one story to tell, one place to go, the support he needs when he needs it, access from wherever he needs it, not just from his work, but from outside of the defense network. And it's designed by him and designed by his peers so that it's fit for purpose. Thank you, everybody, for joining our presentation. We hope you've got some value. My colleagues and I will be at the Q&A directly afterwards, so please feel free to join us and ask us any questions. We're happy to answer them.
Thanks so much. The team is moving over to our Q&A platform, so if you have any questions, join them there. Again, you can do that by clicking on the link in the agenda to join on the Wonder platform. Just a few housekeeping items. The keynote kicks off at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, so looking forward to seeing you all there. And if you're interested in working with Code for Canada, you can reach out to us at partnerships@code4.ca. Again, that's partnerships@code4.ca. And if you're interested in following our work, you can find us at Code4CA. That's Code4CA on Twitter. Thanks so much and have a great day.